keynote speaker, Wesley ter Haar, founder of MediaMonks and executive director at S4 Capital, working alongside of Sir Martin Sorrell, former founder of WPP. Wesley will talk about his now, near, next framework and share more light on the impact of COVID-19. Wesley, take it away.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Let me do a screen share and pull up my presentation here. There we go. So thank you for the invite. Super fun to be a part of this. Managed to catch some of the previous presentation. I think tease up this presentation quite nicely. It's a bit more in depth on some of the creative opportunities, some of the disruption we're seeing to branding, to marketing, and to our side of the industry, which is more related to advertising and production. We have a half an hour, so I'm gonna start with a very short, very quick intro. We call these sessions the Open Monastery, and hopefully there's enough information, insight, inspiration to make it worth your collective time. The introduction here is that I'm Wesley ter Haar. I founded MediaMonks back in 2001. I'm on the board of S4, which is Sir Martin Sorrell's new gig, and I'm normally based between our LA and our Mexico City office, but I'm currently working from home in Amsterdam, where I founded the company almost 20 years ago. MediaMonks, when I talk about it, it's really about three things: amazing talent that we're able to organize and operate around client needs. That leads to some really great work. And then, of course, we're future-proof, which is part of what we'll be discussing today, this idea of being ready for the next wave of consumer behavior and technology. And that's definitely being compressed by COVID, which is quite an interesting context here. Single company, 30 countries, 2,400 people. And there's a slight delay here on the slides. If I would have to position it in a single line, MediaMonks/S4 is really an engine to help brands and businesses innovate their marketing and media spend. So with that being said, let's get into the context here. Now, near, and next, I think from a COVID perspective, we can actually position that as solving the now. This is smart solutions for day-to-day challenges. The near is really this idea of positioning in a different way, saying different things. We heard some of the research earlier, how you authentic and assistive along the COVID curve, which is different country to country, community to community. And then what happens next is really these strategic steps that we're coiling when the masks come off, right? A return to normalcy is gonna be a normalcy that has some really deep changes to culture and to user behavior and to community, and how do you actually set up for success against those things. A bit of context in this space. I think there is an interesting part to this, which is that in part, we're going back to some of the original intent of interactive. I think if you look at digital creative and you look at digital creativity in general, for a large part, it's actually been modeled on a very traditional idea of entertainment, which is film. So digital creative might be shorter film, it might be film in a different format, but in many ways, it really is still film, which means we tend to treat our mobile as a smaller TV, which is really down to the consolidation of online advertising budgets and the big players like Google and Facebook. That really drove this idea of digital advertising, digital content, digital brand experience being mostly linear and mostly film-based. Which is weird, because if you actually look at what we know about mobile users, they tend to reward creativity and interaction. We see that every time a new platform explodes, TikTok being the latest example, Snapchat before that. It tends to be a lot more interactive, a lot more tactile, a lot more about fun than our advertising tends to look in digital spaces. So one of the interesting things that COVID is doing is putting a bit of pressure on that idea of linear digital advertising being a logical place to play, because we know that the #1 entertainment industry now is actually fully interactive. It's gaming. So while we've modeled our industry on the former winning player in entertainment, we should probably start looking at something that's more interactive, because this is where a lot of brands now find themselves, and COVID is putting all of this in the pressure cooker. There's creative that really functions, feels, looks very traditional like film, and then there's media, which is all about distribution and reach and retargeting. And this idea of experience sort of lives in this empty spot in the middle, which is really where a lot of brands now find themselves. with people no longer being able to shortcut through that experience via physical means, via store visits, via pop-ups, via experiential. It all needs to happen online. And most of the brand ecosystems and digital marketing strategies aren't really set up to do that well. So let's look at what we're seeing. I'm going to take 3 interesting sort of trends per area, the now, the near, and the next, and sort of give some context. So solve the now, we saw a very similar stat in the previous presentation. Sharp, short shock to the system mid-March. We have offices in APAC, office in Shanghai, so we've sort of been following the curve for a few months, but this sort of global realization with Western Europe and the US hitting that at a similar time frame really starts hitting in mid-March. And the first thing it does, it sort of celebrates the scrappiness of brands and advertising and production companies. So the things we see happening immediately is the production industry distributing shoots. Where can we still produce content? We're going to live stream clients and directors into that place, and we're still going to keep production going, which I think is a testament to creative people and production people in general. We're seeing a lot of film content move into animation, both 2D and 3D, some examples here, because there's still a need and a want to communicate. And this is happening in many cases mid-campaign, mid-project. And everybody is still really getting their heads around on the mid to long-term impact of it. This is just about, can we still get stuff finished? And that starts sort of moving into some spaces. We work very closely with Toyota for the Olympics, start moving into places where, as we start understanding some of the changes to our own planning and our own roadmap, can we change our messages a bit by using the same content we have? So edits and re-edits to keep the story moving and maybe moving in a slightly different direction. But really this first phase is all about scrappiness. That means uptick in influencer marketing, time of social distancing, social moments, but I think social channels just sort of up their level of importance, and we're seeing that in most of the stats, which means people are actually leaning into these platforms, not just to connect with friends, but also follow the people that they followed, and they're expecting different stories from those people. So we're seeing brands lean into influencer marketing, lots of FMCG influencer marketing with some really interesting opportunities for different moments, different needs for recipes, different needs for content. I'm hearing a beeping sound, but I'm not sure if that's just me. Let me check. I'm just going to keep going if it's just me. Outdoor goes indoor is actually really interesting. When we go back to this, we see fashion sort of lean into comfort, which of course is a really nice sort of relevant moment. And we actually see outdoor, which you would expect to be a category to really struggle with this, do some really interesting influencer-based marketing. Outdoor goes indoor. So again, this is relatively scrappy work, and it starts looking at the new normal. And the new normal to me is a really interesting discussion. This is the video, I won't show the whole thing, that introduces this idea of safe studios where you can shoot at a distance and everything is according to strict guidelines and rules and regulations. But part of this starts hinting at a new normal, right? So this initial scrappiness actually starts creating something that I suspect, not just short term, but even midterm will be a new normal and really change how we think about content production. And really what it does, it combines a few things. It means fewer people on location, means less travel, means live streams, starts lowering budgets as well. So brands and procurement teams across the globe are getting used to a new normal of content production, and some of those things will not go away. I think the moment people realize that there is quite a lot of a buffer in these types of projects, we'll see that become the new standard, which is completely going to change production as an industry, which separate conversation, but it's really interesting to look at. And of course, more robotics, which I think, especially in film production, is an interesting solution that has been under-leveraged so far. So we're seeing scrappiness. We're seeing some of that scrappiness actually support some I think, new normal elements. The third part of the solve now is really this idea of having to fill gaps really quickly. People are social distancing. We saw some of these stats, retail going down immensely, online sales going up, not necessarily category specific, but we have seen some hints of what happens when you have a really strong digital ecosystem. Nike actually beats their targets in China, even as physical retail falls down. What does that mean? It means Nike has an amazing digital ecosystem. As people can't shop physically anymore, they're actually getting some of that into their ecosystem. So they're actually outperforming, which means a lot of brands that are caught in this no direct-to-consumer space need to become direct-to-consumer really, really quickly. And they're doing that in a variety of ways. Some are leaning into social e-commerce, some are leaning into Amazon, some are trying to spin up solutions really quickly. But we're seeing brands with a 18-month D2C digital transformation roadmap become a D2C brand in 2 weeks. People are seeing the gaps exposed in their ecosystem, and they're trying to solve that really, really quickly. So if you look at that from an industry impact perspective, long term, we're expecting lower budgets and different briefs in the content production space, in the campaign production space. I suspect we'll see a foundationally different production process, a lot less travel, more live streaming, more robotics. We're seeing some aesthetics, and I think this is culture. We're seeing some aesthetics now that I think may stick long term. I think this idea of realness, this idea of all of us being stuck in conference calls, maybe not at our Sunday best, it's bringing an aesthetic to life that's being extended with influencer marketing and now with brands doing the same thing, that I think culturally some of that will actually stick, and we'll see less polish and less sort of high-end production moving forward. And then we're just seeing all of these ecosystems, all of these brand ecosystems being pressure tested in real time, and gaps are being exposed, and the brands that can move quickly are trying to fill them in really, really quickly. So that's the now. I think the near was really about saying different things. And depending on your timeline, you are 2 to 3 months in to 6 weeks in. So this is really the focus now. And when we talk about saying different things, it really starts here. I think this idea of did they help, which is did companies act as good citizens during this time? It's actually putting a lot of pressure on celebs as well. Huge pushback against sort of celebrity Instagram usage that is totally off. But it really becomes about who stood up and ended up being a good citizen of their community, of their country, of the globe. And we're seeing the first sort of pushback of what that actually means. The small business loans in the US, maybe not going to the companies you would expect those companies or those loans to go to. And we're seeing companies feeling themselves forced to give back those loans. And this is one example, Ashford, which is a hotel group, but there are many, many, many of these examples. And more pressure will actually go on this, because I think instinctively we all saw those small business loans for the restaurant in our street, the bars on our corners, and the local community. And that's not necessarily where it's now going, and we're going to see that reflected in cultural pushback. New moments. So again, 3 things that are near, but I would say we're, let's say, 2 months in. So this is really where a lot of the focus is. New moments, hugely exciting, right? We're seeing the expected moments, growth of gaming, of course, growth of subscription surges at Netflix, of course. But we're also seeing completely new channels blow up, right? We're seeing Zoom go from 10 million to over 200 million users. We're seeing conference call tools that, sadly, I guess everybody on this call tends to be stuck on every day, suddenly become family communication tools, digital dinner tools, digital drink tools. So these moments are scaling up, and new people are being pulled into these ecosystems every single day, and they're changing the reason these systems are being used. A really quick example here that I just really like that our lab team has been working on is, if conference call tools now are ways for us to connect with friends, should we gamify those places? And this is an example of a conference call game where you actually go into this call. It asks you to look for a thing. You have to find it in your house, show it to the camera, and we use image recognition to see who wins. So it sort of becomes a rummage around your house game, fun conversational tool. We've used it now quite a lot amongst ourselves, and it's absolutely hilarious. But this is interesting. Moments, channels being used for different ways, create different moments for us to actually be meaningful and be fun and be functional. Great example, we supported Wyden and Nike to start doing live stream training exercises, because they understand their role now is to still keep people active. What better way to do so than an hour every Saturday where a professional trainer takes people through a training exercise. And we've seen hundreds of thousands of people log in every single weekend. And of course, that is not just moments, it's also messages. And messages to me is a tricky one. We heard that just now, like where are you authentically placed to say something? I think this message is really um, on point. We saw a lot of brands initially go to the pandemic montage. We will get stronger, we will get back. And it became such a quickly consolidated sort of area of creative that there was a great parody of it that came out a week and a half ago that sort of ended that space. Like nobody should do it anymore. It's been done. And it also wasn't ownable. I think a lot of brands went into that space instinctively, but didn't really reflect what they could actually do in that space. So when we talk about this, we look a lot at role and responsibility. What role / responsibility should or could you have as a brand? And is it authentic and is it ownable? And are you going to be respected and welcomed in that role, or doesn't it make sense and is it too much of a stretch? That really starts with social listening. It starts with insights. It starts with the data we saw in the previous presentation. You need to deeply understand what's happening in community and in conversation to start thinking about the context of your COVID message. This can't just be a one size fits all montage piece. And it also can't sort of veer too far outside of the comfort zone where you should position, because there'll be a huge amount of blowback. So this isn't an easy thing to do, but it gets really, really insightful when you really start digging into this. This is anonymized for a client in the FMCG scene. The research showed that even on the 15th of March, the #1 conversation was about food, because everybody that sort of started getting their heads around this lock-in, the thing they defaulted to en masse wasn't COVID, it was food. It was, what do we do? How do we survive? What can I get? Where is it? What should I cook? And those start to become places where if you're an FMCG brand, you can be helpful, you can be assistive, you can be current, you can be relevant, you can do it in a meaningful way. So the data part to this, and I'll keep this short because we saw some really extensive stuff of this earlier, you can really start tracking changes to communities. Local first is clearly happening right now. Do you have a role to play there? I think it's really interesting to see digital naive groups go to digital native groups. Suddenly grocery shopping online for 65 plus is exploding. Your older family members are now using Zoom and Hangouts like they've never actually used them before, but they're getting used to them because that's the way to connect. So there are huge changes happening at a culture level where people are forming new habits, and those habits hopefully stick, and hopefully some of them won't, but many of them will, depending on the trigger of that habit, the friction they have, and the enjoyment they have. And that's a really interesting place for brands to potentially play, which gets us to new meaning. This is the only video I'll try and show, and I'll skip it after about 30 seconds, but it is Facebook's ad. So this was the original montage ad, which I would say actually was perfectly done, beautiful piece. I'll give it 30 seconds just to keep us moving, but a bit of context. So to keep us moving, if you have some time to check it out, please do. I honestly think it was perfect, on brand. And then you see Facebook sort of moving into that space, using their own tools to help small and medium-sized businesses to better advertise during this time. Which channels and tools and advertising opportunities are there to keep your business going even during this time? So you see this idea of Facebook sort of finding new meaning during this time, which is hugely powerful, and I think will make them come out ahead of where they started this moment, because they're recognizing it and they're recognizing the meaning their brand, their ecosystem, and their apps can actually have. Industry impact, we've looked at brand purpose for years now, and it's been vaguely defined, and I think in many cases not that well. I think we're moving from brand purpose to brand responsibility. Did you turn up? Did you take an active, good citizen of the world role in what's happening right now. And I think that will be what brands are going to be tested against when we return to some sense of normalcy. Digital transformation, not just of companies, but of the consumer. Massive switch to new channels. Because of that massive switch, now under-leveraged channels. Opportunities abound to be meaningful in those new moments. Long-term changes to consumer behavior. There are new traditions being born right now that will stick, and they'll stick in ways that create completely new abilities to reach consumers and be helpful and meaningful. And then I do suspect the digital giants will get stronger because of this, because we're just spending more time there. And I think they're very quickly realizing what is missing in their ecosystems and missing in their channels, and they're trying to solve that, which makes our life collectively a lot easier. Which gets us to next, right? This is where the headspace now is going, which is everybody's sort of gone from complete shock to the system to we keep the machine running to what happens next, which is really this idea of when the masks come off, and it needs a bit of context. Which if you look at Alibaba, which is now valued at $500 billion plus, anecdotally, a lot of the sort of reason of growth was SARS in 2002, which completely changed how the region looked at shopping. Huge shock to the system for physical retail, moved into e-com. Alibaba was ideally positioned to grab a lot of that growth, and it catapulted them forward, which in the context of today's sessions, there will be many companies born from this time, or many companies that lean in and pivot into this time that will have huge, huge headwinds or huge wins to sort of get them moving forward. I think there are three parts here again when it comes to strategic steps. One is the 0 to 1. I think this is a transformation, digital transformation. It is something that will no longer happen in PowerPoint slides. It will happen in projects. We do not have the time for an 18-month process by consultants. We need things that actually happen, which brings me to the second point. Solve ecosystem gaps quickly, single KPI sprint. What's the most important thing for us to get to the next level? These things will be more fragmented because of that, quicker, because of that, more impactful. And what to me is really interesting, digital transformation has been in the important but not urgent category on so many roadmaps, where of course it's important, but it doesn't need to happen tomorrow. We're seeing clients literally ask, what can we have online next week? Who are trying to parse their 12, 24, 36-month roadmaps of digital transformation. So it's transforming digital transformation in and of itself. Only plug for us, Google Reactivating Customer Obsession is a really good report that we've done around what this actually means and how COVID is compressing all of that into a shorter time frame. Emerging tech to me is really interesting. There's been this wave of changing user behavior, and the message for me 2 months ago would be cool, but tread carefully because consumer adoption isn't quite there. COVID is driving consumer adoption of these new technologies really quickly, which means you can get into them earlier at scale. First one, VR, according to Zuckerberg, the next great computing platform. He said that a few years ago, and at that moment in time, that felt shaky at best. We were seeing Gartner sort of communicate around it quite positively, but I think a bit too early in the cycle. If you look at it now, this is where it was stuck, which is very business to business, this idea of training people using VR, much more powerful than sort of flat 2D training programs. So it was really seen as a training and recollection tool. And we've done some work in that space for Google. I'm going to skip this video to keep us going. But what you see now is augmented reality and virtual reality starts becoming really interesting ways to shortcut some of the missing physical experiences. It's also going to be a really rich content play because so much content production that we would have otherwise watched on Netflix and Amazon and others later this year isn't currently being produced. Look at it as the writer's strike from years ago. We're going to have a huge content gap, and VR could be really well placed to do that at scale, which really brings me to the Travis Scott Fortnite concert that happened last week. Over 12 million concurrent users watching that. This idea of congregating in digital physical spaces, VR is a really powerful tool for that. So I think this is one of those growth moments for VR because it connects to what I would say is the first great headset, the Oculus Quest, which came out last year, relatively affordable, wireless, high quality, and there'll be more of that type of news happening this year. So this could definitely be VR's moment. Lots of interesting things being launched by Facebook in that space. Quick video here, which is about Facebook Horizon, which is a shared space to commune in. Think about the need for that type of communal activity if more and more we are less inclined to go to communal events, even post this sort of initial wave of COVID. And there's some really great virtual physical avatar work happening, where the image we're seeing here to the right is a digital avatar, which is being captured in real time by somebody wearing a VR headset. So lots of activity there. AR, Tim Cook, he regards it as an idea as big as a smartphone. That's a big statement for Tim to make. We've always been bullish on AR. The intuitiveness of the technology, it's connected to the device you already own. It can give us both narrative and interaction. So bullishness has always been there. I just think it's going to grow because it's the perfect replacement for physical in-store retail demos of products. And the research shows that even if you demo a product in digital, it has the same brain effects, has the same impact on memory, same sort of emotional resonance. So we'll see a lot more AR demo work happen, just because it's such an easy lift to replicate something that tends to happen in the physical world. AR is the perfect sort of touch point content piece to actually get people along that conversion path and that commerce funnel. And I think it's going to speed up this idea of camera as a browser, image recognition leading to AR. People are going to want to touch less things. So scanning something to get the information instead of picking stuff up. Sounds a bit strange, but it's definitely the direction we're seeing a lot of the guidelines moving. And then the unknown element here is the rumored Apple glasses, which we'll see if that actually gets some more traction this year. But there might be a product that finally gets technology and fashion into a decent spot that people feel comfortable with wearing this at scale. So VR, AR, the next sort of wave is voice. This type of stat, which came out a few years ago, was clearly over-indexed. We didn't get to 50%. We are seeing, again, growth of voice because people want less touching of things. So there's going to be some really interesting ways to not have to touch products and counters and use voice technology. This is going to uptick the use of it. It's also a very human technology. Our brains are hardwired to make things we talk to sort of embedded with human traits. I would actually really like to see the stats of uptick in people using their in-home assistants. I don't have those stats yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's a huge uplift there because it's someone to talk to. I'm going to skip the next slide, which is a demo of your Google Home as a marriage counselor. Bit scary, but a nice sort of reflection of where some of this is going. And then the last part of the emerging technologies is AI and machine learning. There's been a lot happening in that space. Most of the news we'll hear over the next few months will be very positive about this space because it's going to help us understand the deep data behind the COVID disease and maybe even help us solve parts of it. So you'll see lots of positive news here. The reality so far is that it's quite a scary space still. Example, it used to take us 20 hours of spoken data to be able to recreate someone's voice. We literally now need 2 sentences and we can have a digital conversation mimicked with a voice of an actual person. So this space, I think, is further ahead than most people understand. It's really something to start thinking about deeply. Machine learning means every brand, every business has eyes. We have ears now. We should start building that into products, into services. And it's interesting to understand how Google talks about this, which is ambient computing. This idea that technology needs to sense where you are, what you need, and when you need it. And more we're of course moving into that space. There's definitely some privacy worries there. But this idea of being always on ambient devices that are helpful across every moment, we'll see more and more of that happen because of COVID as well. And then the last part of this presentation is what I call digital as a destination. So strategically, we saw the initial shock. We saw a lot of people understand that physical events were not going to be possible, but the timeline of that was unclear. So a lot of conversations started with, we have an event next month, we can't do the event, let's replace it. I think realistically, we now understand this isn't about event replacement. rules have changed, congregating large amounts of people in a single place, that is not a short-term activity. It's a year away at least, and might be longer. And there might be a lot of complexity of people that get to go there and people that won't be able to go. So this isn't about event replacement. It also isn't about just live streams. I think that was what we've seen the first wave, and we've done a lot of them. The excitement and the energy of in-person interactivity isn't really there on live stream. I think for brands, it's dangerous just to lock everything into live stream because you're not capturing the data. The live stream tends to run via tools like Zoom, tools like Facebook, Google, you know, all of them. That's not your data. It's the same mistake that was really made with social, where all of that was handed to a third party. That party built an amazing business on that data, and now you have to pay to get access to it. So I don't think it's just about running a live stream and expecting that to sort of recreate the experience of being in physical spaces together. But it's also not just a website. It probably lives on the web or multimodal, but it's not just the website. It is a combination of all of these things, which means that I would say the key trend moving forward is digital as a destination. How do you think about your digital ecosystem as a place for people to spend time instead of a place for people to get information? Industry impact, digital transformation needs to transform, and we're seeing it happen day by day. Urgency is more important than consultancy. I think this changes how consultancy, the consultancy industry sort of has to look at digital transformation. There'll be a much quicker adoption of emerging technology by consumers. AR, VR, voice, I think the key ones. And to a large extent, and I mentioned this at the beginning, I think we're going back to the original intent of digital. Original intent of digital was always experience meets immersion meets personalization, which to me is digital as a destination. And that is, hey, thank you. I think I just about made it in 30 minutes. Thank you so much for the time. If you have any questions, drop me an email at Wesley MediaMonks. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but thank you for the time.
Thank you, Wesley. Do you have a couple more minutes for questions, if you don't mind, or do you have
the hard stuff? I'm good. I've some.
Awesome. So the first question we have is from Jack Shannon. Thank you so much, by the way, for your presentation and your time. We appreciate it. Are you in the Netherlands, by the way?
Yeah, currently I'm in lockdown in Amsterdam. I'm on day 52.
Awesome. And it's 6 p.m. over there, correct?
Yeah.
Or 5, oh, got it.
6.
All right, so the first question we have is from Jack Shannon from Recess. He's also a CEO and founder of a startup in the events space as well. And the question he has is, you mentioned digital transformation of the consumers with a shift to under-leveraged channels. How are you seeing brands leverage the big surge in virtual events as a new way to connect with consumers?
To be honest, I think a lot of brands are still getting their heads around what that means. We have seen brands sort of try and lean into the communal aspect of music, especially. So a lot of brands trying to facilitate musical moments that otherwise would have happened because people would go to events and concerts. I just don't think it's really working at the moment because it's purely that live stream moment, which is okay, but I think we've sort of gone through the first wave of that. So now it's really about the community, the experience, the excitement of congregating for something that is quite unique. The challenge for digital is all about scale. Excitement a lot of times is about scarcity. So how do you combine those things? Because a great ticket for like a front row ticket for a great concert, that's more exciting than looking at a live stream of something that everybody's looking at. So I think there is a bit of a redefinition of how those things work that is happening right now. I think a startup in the event space is both really difficult, but also extremely exciting now, because I think there's billions of dollars spent that are loose that have to be spent in different ways now. So really interesting industry to look at. Got it.
And I had another question for all the startups on the line today. There's a lot of great founders on the line. What kind of advice can you give to everybody, all the entrepreneurs and startups on the line, to manage you know, this crisis, through this challenging time. As a founder of a company yourself, I'm sure you've gone through a lot with MediaMonks and getting to where you are, and access to fundraising. You know, a lot of startups are struggling with, you know, following up on fundraising. Curious to see what you have, you know, what kind of advice you have for everybody on the line listening today.
Yeah, it's a variety of things. Button down. This is not an easy time. It's going to be difficult to get funding. Revenue could be under pressure. So you're trying to build as long a runway as you can possibly build. Put something in front of you where you know there's opportunity. I think there's an amazing amount of white space happening now. Opportunities are easier to get. I'm talking to clients where normally it would take 6 months to get a bite at something, and that bite is now happening in 1 week because everybody is waiting to hear what happens now. So there is an amazing opportunity to position aggressively as a thought leader and really move your business forward because of that. And then the third part is it's never, and I think entrepreneurs have to do this anyway, but you have to roll with the punches because you're going to get completely undeserved bad news more than you'd like. But there are just things out of your control now that you can't have influence your decision making. So it's about moving forward, taking the bad beats as they come, and just trying to find white space and open up opportunities quickly. But yeah, I think my mindset is always you have very little, well, you have no control or impact on macroeconomics, so you have to create your own little microeconomics bubble to keep the fight going.
Makes sense. And one last question before we let you go here. We have a question from Wymin. What do you think the impact of security and privacy will have in the new normal world, in your opinion?
It's a very interesting one. Question. Well, it's so realistically, it's a scary question, not because I think I'm scared of the privacy part of it. I think I'm scared of the sort of conversation that will happen around it. So we're already seeing some of these things happen in Asia Pacific, where you'll be tracked, you'll have a passport to be able to go into certain places. This idea of a record and that being a way to do certain things or not do certain things. I think a lot of countries would like to go that way. I think Apple and Google building some of that tracking capability into their OSs makes a lot of sense. I just think that the conversation that it opens up in the world and the pushback that it gets from people that are worried that it's sort of Big Brother is going to make for this huge split at a cultural level of people that are using these tools versus people that aren't using these tools. And it's just going to make the sort of the culture clash or the culture war that we see globally heat up. So my take on it is I'm not worried about the privacy component per se. I think it makes a lot of sense to lean into what Google and Apple are doing there, because we mostly have phones made by those folks, at least with software made by those folks. But I'm worried of it working at scale, because I think it's a conspiracy-laden topic. Like if people are burning down 5G masts globally, I'm not sure they're gonna install a tracking app on their phone anywhere soon.
Yes. And for all the brands and startups on the line today, we took a quick poll of those who can benefit by implementing some of the new technologies that you were talking about and throughout these challenging times. What is the best way to get in touch with you and the rest of the team at MediaMonks?
Easiest Wesley at MediaMonks.com. Easy way to drop me a note. And otherwise MediaMonks.com, the website. But always open for questions and conversations. I think it's been, from my perspective as a founder, also a very energizing moment, because you're having more impactful conversations, I think, now with clients and with partners than you normally have. And that is actually a really very things move quicker because of this. And we're always available for conversations.
We appreciate your time, Wesley. Thank you so much for being with us and being a keynote speaker today.